you were leading the women's group. You and you like to fuck with me. And I left the house and I came back, and of course you guys weren't finished yet.
Yeah.
And you had me.
I don't think I remember what you're talking about.
You were like, "Come on in," and I was like, "Okay." I thought you guys were done. And there's a room of like 10 women, beautiful,
minimum 10,
amazing women. Yeah. And you're like, "Lay down." What the fuck's going on?
That's right. I know exactly what you're talking about.
And then
I thought you were going to talk about
you invited them to massage me.
This at all. I've completely forgot about
you invited them to massage me. It was not
their hands all over you.
Put my hand, not in a sexual way. There was no sexual thing. That was confronting as fuck.
Yeah.
That was really confronting to just receive that.
Yeah.
I walked in the door. We want to love you, Tripp. Mm-hmm. Here comes all of this light, all of this love force. It was so confronting. That's what I'm speaking to.
You are listening to the new man beyond the Macho Jerk and the New Age Wimp. Your host is men's coach Tripp Lanier.
Is our drive for more money, more status, or more stuff really just an attempt to fill a God-sized hole in our lives? Do you ever feel awkward when expressing love to others? And how does our need for safety block us from having satisfying relationships? Today, Alyson and I try to understand why love can be so challenging to receive. We discuss the ways we armor ourselves to avoid vulnerability and how we can still feel alone, even when we're with others. You're just going to have to menopause yourself your way through this. You just got to
menopause my way through this. Is that what you just said? What does that look like?
We're going to find out in a world.
The voice is so in a world today.
With a woman in menopause, hot flashes and swinging moods.
Okay. Well, do you know what we're talking about today?
No, I asked you that downstairs.
Why are you already recording?
So I don't forget to record. Because we get rolling on
we have to kind of work it out first.
It's all right. We can work it out.
I did write something down that I thought, one day this would be a really cool video or a blog post, but I'll probably never do it. So maybe we should talk about that.
What's that?
We are confronted when in light. When we're in light, when light is beaming on us, where we get confronted, it's confronting to our small self. And so I wrote down how it's confronting, and that the fact that it's basically just what light does, that by nature is shine a light on our shadows. It shines light in dark places. Mm-hmm. And so
there's the being afraid of light, and then ultimately being afraid of our own light.
I mean, that's a good hook, but I don't think that's what it is, actually. I think it's, are we afraid of our wholeness? Mm-hmm. Because the world works really hard to be light all the time. Think of it, the meaning, the Instagram, like, what do they call it? Photoshopping your life. Like, I'm going to make everything light. I'm going to make everything my awesome life, instead of, no, I might be grumpy today, or I might be an asshole. Yeah, I might have really bad diarrhea today. I just thought of an Instagram influencer, like, oh no, okay, today's the day for my photo shoot. Oh no, I'm getting really bad diarrhea. And we're in the ocean. I haven't even had any fizz yet. Anyway, my point is
I just want to point out, you were the one that's laughing at the poop joke. I didn't even come up with the poop joke, and I didn't say the poop joke. I didn't egg you on about the poop joke.
I was trying to think of a really clear example of, like, well, that would be wholeness. Like, that's a whole person. There's nothing wrong with having to poop. But then if a person's like, no, I have to be perfect.
Okay, I like this. I like where this conversation goes. Let's go there, because
okay.
There is that is the thing. Like, right, is I can't be all the things. Can't be all the pieces of myself, because then these terrible things will happen. So I'm up for that.
I won't be loved. It won't be. You know, I don't love myself. You know, there's all sorts of possibilities there. So
yeah, okay,
not enough. Okay, so this as the story goes. I I was on a call with, and I invited you to listen. And I was on a call with Steve Hardison, which has been a coach for decades. He lives out in Arizona. He's a kind of eccentric guy and
Calls himself the ultimate coach.
Well, I don't know. He probably calls himself that. Definitely other people have called him that. And there's a lot of spin around that being him. And I could get into what he's about, but I'm not going to too much. But essentially, I had the privilege and the pleasure of being on a call with him. And one of the things that I really loved about him is that he essentially every day practices loving, like really loving. He's super extroverted. And so he pretty much won't go anywhere outside of his house without talking to people and sharing love in some way. So, for example,
which looks like different.
It looks different. Yeah. One of the examples he said was he had to go to the grocery store later today, and it actually brought me to tears. He was like, I have to go to the grocery store later today, and I'm excited to go because the time of day that I usually go is when all the old people go, and these old women that are there, you know, they get up and years in life, and all they have really left is getting their hair done. And he's like, I can't wait to go find someone in the aisle and look her in the eye and say, your hair looks beautiful today. That was so dear. So things, just simple things like that, all the way to fiercely loving things in his coaching. And so one of the things that happened for this group was after he was a guest lecturer and sort of, you know, interacted with us, he jumped off, and then the group was asked what was going on. And the first person that spoke said that felt really confronting for them, that it wasn't all unicorns and rainbows for them.
Yeah.
And they were really stirred up and uncomfortable. And so that led me to believe, which is something that I know happens all the time. It's kind of one of the reasons why transformational workshops tend to be so transformational, is that if you think of like a flashlight in a room, when you shine a light on anything, it confronts the darkness. Like it shines a light on what you can't see usually. Right. So when we're confronted in light, I think it's confronting to what we would call the small self.
Yep.
And it's not a bad thing necessarily.
Let's just define the small self here. I would call the small self kind of the collection of our stories and our identity. This is who I am. And it's usually without really realizing it, it's a kind of a defensive posture. It's a kind of, what am I proving to the world and proving to myself? Yeah. And kind of always looking out and always like guarding against things, but it can manifest itself as being impressive, and you know, here's what I do to make sure that I'm accepted and safe and those types of things. But it's an identity or a story that we like about ourselves and we latch onto.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be, we don't even have to like it. It's just something we could be used to. So if we have a really harsh self-critic
right, but that's what I mean. It's like, this
is all the time.
This is comfortable. This is, I've grounded myself in this identity. Even if I'm miserable, I lock into it.
Yeah. And so that in the psychojargon, psychobabble word for that is neurotic process. But in what I liked about what this guy said, Hardison said, was they're lies. These are the things that we lie to ourselves about. And so we get fully absorbed.
Let's go into that, because what's the lie then from that perspective?
Like, I'm not enough. I suck at this. Nobody will love me. If anybody loves me, they'll leave. If this, then that.
I have to be this person or else.
I talked to somebody last week that was like, if I fully open my heart up to spirit, I will be physically disabled. Like that was their story they were telling themselves.
Physically disabled.
I will get some sort of illness or some sort of problem in my body where I will be disabled.
Wow.
Because it happened to their mother.
Oh.
And so they're convinced that it would happen to them. When their mom had a spiritual awakening, that also came with some illness. And so, or some illness came on the tail of that. And so the point is like, these are things that we tell ourselves that, or like, I can never love too much because I can't possibly risk losing that one time that I lost so much because I loved openly or whatever. So there's it's kind of infinite what we tell ourselves.
It's all rooted in safety though, and avoiding loss.
Typically rooted in safety. Yeah. It could be something simple. Like I took a walk in the woods and got bit by a snake once. And now anytime there's any conditions that are similar to the woods or high grass or whatever the conditions were when that happened, I'm convinced that there's a snake out here. Like
I feel like you're bringing me a lot into this conversation. I would like for you to tone it down.
I mean,
just because I saw a copperhead in the garden the other day.
And you won't stop looking now for copperheads every time you go out there.
I don't want the dog to get bit.
Yeah, I understand. Copperheads aren't like, well, never mind.
Okay. Yeah. Here we go. Tell me. Yes. So rooted in safety. So I appreciate you just doing this because I think so many of us have no idea that our identity is the small self and that there is other. And so if we're going to go into this conversation of wholeness, it's a strange concept. And usually it's the small self that can co-opt it and say, oh, I'm wholeness and kind of put on an act.
Yeah.
And there's a bypassing that happens there, which is I will act like wholeness. I will kind of put on this thing in order to present myself as wholeness or as big self, as I like to call it. But it's just another mask. It's another ruse that we do. And I want to say all this, like not in a condemning way. Like this is just the shit we do.
This is what we do. I mean, and I appreciate that you said that. It's really important to hear that this is what we will call the egoic, ego. And that's how we get on. I mean, that's how we do it because that's how we don't wear all our nerve endings, everywhere on the outside of our body. I mean, you're right. It is often how we learned to navigate things. And what you're saying when you talk about, if something happens and we contract or we get defensive or whatever happens there, usually it's pretty formative in early years, but whatever happened there saved our asses then.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a really creative adjustment.
We have to have it. We have to have the small self.
We have to have the small self to some degree. I think that I don't know that we have to have it, but we have it.
No, I would say that we do because I think that I was listening to Ken Wilber yesterday, and he was talking about self or small self. In these words, I'll keep our language simple: small self, soul, and then actual self. Big self, spirit. And he said something really beautiful. It was like the small self is what we learn in this lifetime, and the soul is what we learn and carry between lifetimes. And so the small self is the vessel that we land in. It's the brain and it's the body. Yeah. It's the corporeal, gross kind of area that we land into, that the soul lands into. And it needs that. It needs that vessel. And it comes with a brain and it comes with all the things to survive. And it's necessary. And then if you believe in that reincarnation or you believe in the never-ending soul kind of a thing, then it moves on in that way. So I appreciate that. And I like that they can go hand in hand, but there's a point where it becomes limiting. The small self becomes limiting and it can eclipse the soul. It can eclipse the big self.
And I actually want to make a further distinction. I don't know if I'm curious if he did he make a distinction between soul and spirit?
Yes.
What did he say?
Spirit would be more of kind of the non-dual causal state.
Yeah.
The soul is the more subtle realm.
Okay.
But I think just for the sake of this conversation, we could talk about small self and wholeness, which is the soul having a seat in remember. It's soul. And one of the things that I'm reading is like soul is the part of us that remembers spirit.
That's nice. I like that.
Right. And remembering means like it reattaches, like it recombines with spirit. It doesn't split away. Small self has a tendency to split away and be isolated.
Yeah.
It's the wave that is separate from the sea. Right.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm all alone in this.
Right.
It's me against the universe. Whereas the soul is the one that recognizes, no, I am an expression of something much larger. I want to bring this back to where we started, which is what has us shrink or contract when we experience light or we experience somebody else's light or somebody else's wholeness. And then there's a like, oh shit, I don't think I'm okay there.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I like this. Thanks for bringing it back on track too. Good morning. You were saying like, oh, should we talk about it? Like we can't be with our own light. And I was like, no, I think we can't be with our own wholeness. So if we talk about wholeness in terms of small self, soul, and spirit, what happens when light, let's say spirit, shines on us? When light shines in the room and if we feel the presence of spirit or we feel light, love, let's just use the word love to keep it simple. But when love really just blasts us, the thing that makes it uncomfortable is that it shines that light, it shines the love on the places that are convinced they don't deserve love or they can't be loved or they don't trust where the love's coming from until X, Y, or Z, right? So
I have a different take, but go ahead.
Well, I think it's shining a light. I think the thing that makes us uncomfortable is that we are confronted with the parts of ourselves that we ourselves can't be with. We ourselves can't love. What's your take?
I think all of this lives in the same neighborhood. I think when we start to practice wholeness, it's a willingness to look in the mirror and have ourselves reflected back to us, including the bits that we don't like to see. And that can be incredibly confronting. And that can have us feel like, wow, I really am unworthy of love. I really am unacceptable. I really am like, to go through that process can be really challenging. I mean, when I think about instances in my lifetime and therapy and men's groups and psychedelics or whatever, it's usually that mirror right in my face. It's like, fuck, I don't want to see this. I don't want to have to come to terms with that. This is me too.
How is that different than what I was saying? What did you hear?
Then though, I think what can be confronting, because this happens for me too, is like when experiencing somebody's love, that requires vulnerability. It requires accessibility to be loved, to allow that love in. And there's usually armor in place to keep that from happening, to avoid that accessibility. It's not easy to love some people, and I'm raising my hand. Like it's very hard. Like, I'm not going to let this in. If I let this in, I have to open the gates up. And it's not so much that I don't want you to see me. It's more like I don't want to open the gates. I don't want to let down the defenses. If I let down the defenses, I can be hurt. I can be disappointed. I can learn to rely on you and depend on you, and then you'll betray me. And so I see these things as living in the same neighborhood, but they're very different. There's one about coming to terms with who we are and then accepting and forgiving those parts and integrating those parts.
Okay.
And then I think the other aspect of the light that you're talking about is when that light comes at us and we're being loved, it can be incredibly uncomfortable because it challenges the gates and the defenses that we've put up. And I don't know if I want to let that in. Maybe I've been hurt by being so open in the past. It's a raw nerve.
I want to make sure I understand you, because I'm still hearing kind of the same thing. Is like the one shines a light on all these things, and all of these things are the gates.
I can appreciate that. I think it's just more of, one is I don't want to see these things. I don't want to accept these things. I don't want to integrate these things. I've been trying to live my life in a way where you don't see these things and I don't see these things about me.
All right.
And so I go and create this other image of myself.
Okay.
So that's not there. So wholeness is the aspect of like, I get to bring all of those on board. And then through acceptance and forgiveness, I get to be that. And I can relax all the defenses a bit more. When confronted with somebody who is loving, like a Christ consciousness, bringing love and forgiveness, that can be really confronting because it requires our accessibility. And I don't think it's so much about you're going to see me different or you're going to see who I am. That may be part of it. But it's more of, shit, if I let this in, I'll be annihilated. And we're back to what you were talking about earlier, which is like if I allow this thing to open, there is a sense of annihilation there. And that happens in spiritual awakenings. Like the small self gets annihilated sometimes. It kind of gets put back together as part of the integration. But that's often what can happen is that just crumbles. And then we find more of our true identity.
But that's also through love and forgiveness.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. But that's the fear is that the small self gets annihilated in some way, that the small self gets threatened for its existence in that love. There was I don't know if you remember this, but there was I don't know why I'm thinking of it. You were leading the women's group with one of the authentic things. And this is when we lived in Boulder, and you like to fuck with me. And I left the house and I came back, and of course you guys weren't finished yet. Yeah. And you had me.
I don't think I remember what you're talking about.
You were like, come on in. And I was like, okay, I thought you guys were done. And there's a room of like 10 women.
Yeah,
beautiful.
Minimum 10.
Amazing women. Yeah. And you're like, lay down. What the fuck's going on?
That's right. I know exactly what you're talking about.
And then
I thought you were going to talk about
you invited them to massage me.
This at all. I've completely forgot about
You invited them to massage me. It was not
their hands all over you.
Put my hand, not in a sexual way. There was no sexual thing. That was confronting as fuck.
Yeah.
That was really confronting to just receive that.
Yeah.
And that had nothing to do with you're going to see this or you're going to see that about me. Like there was nothing for me to say.
Yeah, I was just loving you up.
It was just, here comes the love. I'm going to die. Here comes all of this light. All of this love force. I haven't done anything to deserve this. I didn't put on a show. I didn't perform. I didn't impress. I walked in the door. We want to love you, Tripp. It was so confronting. That's what I'm speaking to, is like that. It's like, no, I think I'll just go over here and, go upstairs and leave you guys alone. Like that was the thing to go back and retreat.
So I
did lay down and I did get hands on me.
You did lay down. You did get hands on you. You made lots of jokes. I remember that. The whole women, all the group were erupting in laughter and giggles, but they didn't stop touching you.
Deflecting, right?
Yeah, totally trying to deflect.
That's what I'm pointing to.
Yeah. So, the thing that you're speaking to, it occurs to me, the thing that you're speaking to, like when you're kind of making the distinction between what I said versus what you're saying is like what I said is just more like you're noticing. It's like, oh shit, I just got a spotlight on me, and now I'm looking at all the I can see my armpits and I can see under my feet and the dirt under my feet and all that. Like it's like one where you're just noticing. Like the things that are here, like you might see this, all these things, right?
Right.
You might see the dirt on my feet, right? Whatever it is, right? And then the other, so that's a person with themselves. Right. That's being confronted with themselves. The other, what I'm hearing you speak to, is being in relationship. So what is it like when someone is actually, or something, some vibration, literally it could be the freaking UV rays of the sun, and that you're willing to actually give gratitude for. But that's a relational moment where you're taking that in. Isolation.
We create isolation for safety.
Yeah.
We live on our island for safety. And we can live on an island even if we're married, even if we have kids, even if we have friends. We can still be an island. And I know many of us are living as islands, even though we're surrounded by people all the time. That isolation is a safety. So when light and love comes in,
It's threatening.
It's threatening as fuck.
So it
can be.
From your this side of things, what you're saying, not only are we confronted with ourselves and all the shit that we're seeing as a mirror, but we're also then on the really just kind of like on the spot in the hot seat with what do we do in this moment relationally.
Yeah.
Not just with ourselves, but with the love that's coming at us.
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
Right. That isolation is one of the defenses that we have. If I can keep people away, they won't see these things. If they don't see them, then I don't have to see them either. I don't have to be reminded of them either. And so we're trying to get our needs met, but at the same time, it's this clunky thing of how do I get my needs met without being vulnerable? And we're starving. We're starving for that. And so when love comes along, and actual love and acceptance, it can be very confronting. And even when I practice love in a tough love way, with tears in my eyes, bringing that love, it can still be construed as fuck you.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, there's you have had plenty of clients say "fuck you, Tripp," but they say it with loving smiles because they know that they're being loved in that moment.
Right.
As with my clients, like they're like, "Damn, you just brought your sword, and I'm fucking grateful for it." And holy shit, it's hard to be with this.
And it's very hard for me to do that. But that's what I mean. It's like it's I love you so much. I'm not going to allow this masquerade to continue.
Exactly.
At least with us, I see you.
Yes, exactly.
Think about it for a second. What do you want for somebody that is wrestling with this idea of being confronted by love? Or if you come back to the guy in your call that was like really confronted by what he experienced.
I want that mirror for them, and I want love to be able to permeate through all of it. But there has to be, usually it has to be slowed way down. What I would do is like slow way down and identify what is like looking for the exit, which parts are looking for the fire escape, and talk to them first. Like see, not bombard them with love necessarily, but see if they can just stick around a little longer to understand that their life's not in danger, and that they're not going to be annihilated. There is a bit of a bombardment of love, but more like water filling up from the ground floor instead of being showered and with a fire hose.
Yeah.
It's more like, what if we can marinate in the fact that everything is okay. Every aspect of you is okay, even if the parts of you that you don't feel are okay. What if we could bring love to those parts, and that they're just doing the best they can?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where they are. That's just where they are. There's nothing more to it. If that's just the ground we're in and we can start from there, then it's like, okay, cool. I mean, you wouldn't do that to a kid that doesn't know how to, that's struggling learning their vowels or learning how to read, like a speech impediment, or learning certain words. You wouldn't be like, oh my God, you're not allowed here. You suck. Mm-hmm. No, you would just be like, okay, let's work from here. This is where you're at. Mm-hmm. So let's work on it with love.
Yeah.
That's what I would want. What would you want?
I don't think it's none of the stuff that we're talking about with the small self or wholeness is a problem until it is. And I think that it manifests itself as a quote problem when we are feeling empty, we're feeling trapped, we're feeling drained, we're feeling isolated, we're feeling bored, we're feeling overwhelmed. And usually when we get into those places, the small self only has one game. And it's more. I must not be doing enough. I must not be doing it right. So if we don't know that there's anything other than us than the small self, then the small self doubles down and goes and does more of the shit that it thinks is going to work. It keeps playing that. It goes on that. Yeah. Keeps doing that.
Sure.
It keeps seeking more comfort, more certainty, more safety, more acceptance, more impressiveness, whatever, which usually just has us kind of spiraling.
Right.
We're getting more and more removed, more and more isolated.
Of an OCD person right now.
When that starts to become apparent, when that starts to happen, then it can be devastating to see that. And we know it's that when we're buying shit we don't really need, like we're trying to fill, as you say, like fill this God-sized hole with something that, we're just like dumping little trinkets into it. Maybe this will fill me up. Maybe this will do it. Maybe this will do it. We're kind of seeking something. But it's only through this lens of the small self that it creates kind of more, like we get a hit of something and then it's like back into that stuff. And I would just say that if or when we find ourselves in that place, that's a great time to consider that there's something, we are larger than that. We're not just the small self. We're not just the things we do to be impressive and included and acceptable and belong and safe. That there's another aspect of ourselves, and that will feel confronting to the small self.
Sure.
Allowing that love, allowing that acceptance, allowing that forgiveness, because the small self is all about locking that shit down and locking it away, isolating ourselves from that. Attention is not the same as love. I might seek tons of attention, but that's the junk food version. It's a safe thing. I get to be over here, you give me a little attention, and I can't be kind of hurt in that way. So we might think we're seeking love, but we're finding these contorted ways to get our needs met in that regard. It's not nourishing for us.
Yeah, I was thinking, as you were talking about all this, I was thinking like, oh, well, we fill the hole because you're going to laugh at me because I'm going to talk about our culture, like being conditioned, whether it's through social media, through marketing and advertising, through whatever. But it's like we get conditioned for that because everybody's doing the same thing.
It's normal.
So it's the water. It's
normal.
like the water around us this is what it is. This is what it is. This is what it's like. This is what we do. Right.
And so when we see or experience somebody that's coming, maybe that is in touch with more big self or soul or some of the other aspects, it is really confronting to the small self. And the small self usually for me is just like, fuck this. That's uncool. That's gonna, just like there's usually a defensiveness to it. That doesn't jive with this self-image that I have. That actually seems dangerous. But I've also felt at the same time like, God, I would really love that. Like there's a longing.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like everybody actually wants more love in their life.
Yeah, there's like a longing to come home. Like there's a thing like, I'd love to give up this like, this thing this coat that I wear in order to get through life kind of a thing.
I don't know that they actually can think that way, but that feeling is there. There's no question that would be the core message that comes from that feeling that's there.
And that can be a beautiful experience in, let's say, psychedelics or longer terms of meditation, where you get a glimpse, you get to relax that for a moment.
Yeah, and
what feels like a moment, and
contact, like authentic contact with people and animals and all of that.
Well, also just like, oh wait, that's not all of who I am. There's another game other than just being small self, just being in this protecting and pleasing and proving stuff. And that's where learning to turn into the things that we can't accept about ourselves helps us find our wholeness, has us find our forgiveness, and then opens us up to that real, that more nourishing experience of love.
Yeah.
If these interviews are helping you, please leave a positive review on whatever podcast app you use so that others can discover the show more easily.